Welcome everyone to the Score Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host Justin Boone, the lead fantasy analyst at the Score, and today's episode is presented by Subway, who now deliver so you can get back to the game. Week 4 is here. I talked about it last week. We want that 3-game sample size. Now we have it. It's time to start making some moves, trying to improve our teams. One of the ways to do that is to try to identify buy low candidates, players who maybe haven't performed up to their talent level so far, or maybe just to the opportunity that they're getting. Our guest today is going to help us with that. It's Pat Fitzmaurice, host of the Fitz on Fantasy podcast, contributor at thefootballgirl.com. You definitely should already be following him on Twitter, but if you're not, he's at Fitz_FF, another one of the most accurate experts in the industry. And he is doing it again this year. He's actually got a slight lead on me right now. He's in 4th on the season at Fantasy Pros. I'm in 9th out of 140 analysts or so, I believe it is. So, Pat, want to welcome you back to the show. But the first thing I want to know, I like to find this out from a lot of our guests. How are your fantasy teams doing so far this year?
Oh, hey, Justin, first of all, always good to talk to you. And I don't know how long that rankings lead against you is going to hold up because you're pretty good at this. You're always up near the top. Don't downplay it. You're always up there, right there with me. But yeah, how are my teams doing? Well, last week was pretty good, other than one team that I partner on with a friend losing by 2 points, actually 1.6 points on Taylor Gabriel. Losing to a guy who was starting Taylor Gabriel.
Which is what, the 1% of people that started Taylor Gabriel?
Pretty much, yeah.
Maybe the only person?
When I said something about it on Twitter, someone responded like, oh, pretty astute of your opponent to start Taylor Gabriel. I'm like, no, this was not like any instinct. This was just a bad team having to start Taylor Gabriel. So yeah, other than that, it's pretty good. I mean, like my dynasty teams are all kind of in the tank right now. Just like I've gotten wiped out by injuries in dynasty, and these were probably not going to be championship contenders anyway. So dynasty is a washout, and my Scott Fishbowl team stinks.
Oh, but no.
Other than that, I think I'm 2-1 in every home league and 2-1 in a couple industry redraft leagues that I care about. So for the most part, pretty good. Looking forward to those early 2020 dynasty draft picks because I'm going to be picking very early in the first round. And, Scott Fishbowl, hey man, 3 straight playoff appearances, but this is a wipeout season already. Just didn't draft well in that, and that might be a total loss.
Well, maybe you're like me. I know when everyone asks me now, because I'm in a ton of leagues just like you, everybody asks, how do you do it? How do you, you're going to be rooting against yourself basically when you're in that many leagues. And I just say, I root for my rankings at this point. My fantasy teams are kind of secondary. I want to make sure my rankings are accurate. So if you're going with your rankings, you're doing all right so far then.
Oh, yeah, that's about it. I think I do cheer for my rankings just about as much as any team. There are a couple of teams I really care about in home leagues, just bragging rights with friends I've known for 3/4 of my life. So, I gotta do well in those so I can save face. But other than that, yes, I hear you on cheering for rankings.
All right. Well, we got a lot to talk about today. We're teeing up week 4, all the biggest questions facing fantasy managers this week. As I mentioned off the top, though, before we get into week 4, the lineup decisions, all that kind of stuff, who are some buy low targets that you think fantasy owners should be trading for this week?
Well, Marcus Mariota. No, just kidding, Justin. There's no hope for Marcus Mariota. He's terrible. That offense is terrible. O.J. Howard owners are a really restless group, and they weren't really pacified by last week's 66 yards on 3 catches. He's still without a touchdown, but I do think he's still a buy low just because so many of his owners are completely distraught. And this dude has a world of talent. I mean, it's showing up in his yardage per catch, averaging over 20 yards a catch last week. What he did last season, I mean, he's pretty electric with the ball in his hands, and I think it's just a matter of time before he starts making the sort of impact we thought he could make. And I'm still not buying into the Bruce Arians doesn't like tight ends narrative. So I think he would be a good guy to get out and get. And Robert Woods, maybe there's a little more pessimism on him now. And especially with Cooper Kupp just smashing week after week. Woods had a good first week with 13 targets, 8 catches, 71 yards, which was a lot like the kind of stat lines we saw weekly from Woods last week. I mean, he was really one of the most consistent receivers out there. And just, like his bad weeks were 71 yards and no touchdowns. So since then, it's been kind of a dry spell, just 5 catches in the last 2 weeks. But, I still believe in this Rams offense, even if it hasn't quite hit on all cylinders yet. And I think things will balance out a little more. It's not going to be slanted this heavily towards Cooper Kupp the entire season. I don't know if you're buying low on him because he's played well so far, but I think there's even room for more with DK Metcalf. I mean, this guy is just, I'm convinced he's going to be special. And, I didn't recognize that in the pre-draft process, but I'm kind of seeing it now. He's just too much of a physical mismatch for everyone he goes up against. And, it's not like he's all skills and no moxie at all. Like he can actually play. 24.1 yards per catch already, 217 yards through 3 weeks. I think it's only going to get better, especially since the Seattle team is probably not going to be able to run as much as they'd like just because their defense, we're finding out, is not very good. So that's going to put them in some favorable scripts. And I guess the last one would be Miles Sanders, and that's just more of an eye test thing. The numbers aren't good right now, but it seems like every time he has a good run, it gets called back for some sort of penalty. He's close, and now he's had a couple fumbles, and that's going to worry some people. But I really do think he is the best option in this backfield, and it's still a pretty top offense despite what we've seen. And, I do think his owners in most cases are probably feeling some trepidation about him right now. And this might not be a bad time to move in, before he gets it going.
I feel like sometimes it's hard to get those rookies off people. Because I will say I've tried with Sanders. I've tried in a couple leagues. After every single week, I think I've been trying in different leagues to see if I can pry him away from the owner. And it seems like in all my leagues, they kind of feel like, well, he's so low right now that it's not really worth even moving him. I'd say the same about DK Metcalf, but we've seen DK Metcalf go off already. So I think it's going to be even harder maybe to get him from people. But I agree with both those guys. And if you can get Sanders low, absolutely. I acknowledge Robert Woods there because he's on my list as well. Had an okay first week. The big thing, that second week, though, having 5 targets nullified by penalties, having that touchdown nullified by a penalty, that's the stuff that fantasy owners don't necessarily always notice. So we saw what he did last year, and that whole narrative of, the only reason that he was good last year was because Cooper Kupp was out is silly because he was a wide receiver 1 in the first half of the year when Cooper Kupp was there. And then when Cooper Kupp was gone, his numbers actually dropped. He was still a wide receiver 2, but his numbers dropped. So like you, I'm still a believer in that Rams offense. So I'm definitely in on Woods as well. And Howard, I think you got to hang on to him. You're going to see with tight end, they're going to have bad games all year. And I would still want to believe that his 2 bad games just came at the beginning of the season here, and that hopefully he's going to be able to right the ship the rest of the way. I'll mention a couple other guys. Christian Kirk is one that I think you got to go out and get him now. Wide receiver 29 in PPR, outside of the top 40 in standard, but he's tied for 3rd in the league right now in targets. He's got 32 targets on the season. 3rd in the league. No one's talking about Kirk in that respect. So Kyler Murray's going to get more comfortable as the year goes on. The offense is going to improve because of that as the year goes on. I think Kirk's going to be a stud. I think he potentially a wide receiver 2 the rest of the way once that the stats start matching the targets a little bit more there. And then the other one I'll bring up is Robbie Anderson. I know he's on a bye this week, but investing in the Jets might seem kind of strange, but you just got to look at their schedule in the second half of the season. And Darnold's going to be back in a couple weeks, it seems like, maybe even in week 5. From week 9 on, though, here are the opponents that they're going up against. The Dolphins, the Giants, the Redskins, the Raiders, the Bengals, and then the Dolphins again in week 14, the first week of the fantasy playoffs. So if Anderson was dropped, maybe you don't even have to go trade for him. It's possible he's been dropped with how he's been playing and with Darnold out. If not, I think you could probably get him very cheap if you're trying to get him in a trade right now. And it's another reason why I'm also stashing Chris Herndon for the exact same reason, because I think he could come back and take advantage of that second half schedule.
Yeah, really good point on the Jets. I mean, they are at absolute low ebb right now, and people, I think, have just kind of written off that offense. But yes, Darnold's going to come back soon, and you mentioned the schedule. It sets up so well for them. So, maybe even throw Jamison Crowder into that too. Yeah, wheels up for those guys in a few weeks, but people probably aren't going to perceive that right now.
Said leave on time, my baby said leave on time.